how God would answer my sister Joy's question. My last meaningful talk with my sister Joy was at the dialysis center as she completed her final treatments. I put on my ministerial robe, I held her hand, and we had a serious talk about spiritual things, knowing that her death was imminent. 15 days, as it turned out. 6 years prior, before I became your pastor, my sister shared with me in a private conversation her religious views. We make our own heaven and hell on earth, and after that it's lights out forever, said my sister 6 years ago. And what about Jesus? I asked. She spoke, and I listened, and discovered that the Jesus she rejected was not the Jesus of the Bible, but the Jesus portrayed by her upbringing and our culture, graceless, legalistic, rule-demanding, and condemning. I agree, Joy, said I 6 years ago. I don't believe in that Jesus either. Then I shared how I met the Jesus of grace when I was 17, and I pleaded with her to experience the no condemnation Jesus of grace. But she held firm to the cultural and religious distortions of Jesus. It was about that time, 6 years ago, that the Holy Spirit prompted me to become her friend despite our differences. And that's why the last words my sister whispered into my ears before she died meant so much to me. I'm glad we became friends. By the time I met with my sister in dialysis 15 days before she died, she had come a long way from when you're dead, you're dead. She prayed to God and looked forward to life after death, where she expected to see our beloved mom. In some ways, Joy was like a Jewish believer in God who, like Saul of Tarsus, rejected the exclusive claims of Jesus Christ as the Messiah, as most do in our culture. Rabbi Shemili Botiak sums up this perspective when he said, I am absolutely against any religion that says one faith is superior to another. I don't see how that is anything different than spiritual racism. Really? With all due respect, I wonder if the learned rabbi thinks the founders of his own religion, Abraham and Moses, are spiritual racists for thinking that Yahweh is superior to the Canaanite and Egyptian gods. And I wonder if he thinks the 10 Commandments, especially the first commandment, makes God himself a spiritual racist. Frankly, I don't know of any religion that doesn't think their faith is superior to another, including Rabbi Botiak's religion of tolerance, which he thinks is absolutely superior, and therefore by his own definition makes him a spiritual racist. Does it not? But the rabbi isn't a racist. He's just logically confused, like a man who thinks he's a married bachelor. Because you see, Jesus can't be God, as Christianity teaches, and at the same time and in the same way, not be God as the rabbi teaches. Now, that violates logic, not racist morality. And that leads to the question we all want to know. How can we finite humans know the truth about religion? Is religion just a subjective preference? Like green peppers versus pepperoni on a pizza. Or is it objective truth, like cyanide versus food toppings on a pizza? That would be good to know before we eat it, would it not? But how can we know? I mean, if only God himself would come to earth as truth incarnate and just tell us. And that is the claim of Christianity and no other religion. You see, if Jesus came from God and is indeed God, then he'd know. No guesses, no speculations, no theories, no baseless claims, no opinions, no self-defeating contradictory drivel, just the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about the way to God and eternal life. And if truth incarnate comes from heaven to earth and teaches that all religions lead to the same place, Allah is as good as Yahweh, Buddha and Moses as good as Jesus, and anyone who says otherwise is a spiritual racist, then if truth incarnate said that, it would be true. But he didn't. Our relativistic, truth-denying culture says that, but not truth incarnate. Just the opposite. Jesus said, no one comes to the Father except through him. And either this is the truth from God himself, or it is a lie from a deceiver or deranged lunatic. My sister and I were both raised in the church and took Holy Communion as children. But as a teen, she rejected Jesus. And by the time we spoke 6 years ago, she claimed that the historical Jesus did not even exist. Joy, did you know, said I 6 years ago, that there are more secular, historical references to Jesus apart from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels, more references than for the Roman emperor? So, no Jesus, then no Caesar, no Cleopatra. My sister objected. The Gospels were written 25 years ago, after the fact, and memories fade and they get distorted. To be sure, said I, but that's not true of impactful memories. Joy, do you remember when Mom put all of us in the bath together? I was not yet 2, but I vividly remember it because I was traumatized. I was afraid I'd go down the drain. And you rescued me by sitting near the drain. My sister Joy frowned and revealed something I didn't know. She too, at 6 years of age, was afraid of going down the drain. And it was 5-year-old Linda that rescued us. And that triggered other impactful memories that we shared for the better part of 30 minutes. And then I said, Joy, if we can vividly remember with great detail impactful events from 60 plus years ago, do you think if you were in a boat that was about to capsize and you thought you were going to die and Jesus rebuked the storm with a word, that you'd remember? And do you think if you witnessed your dearest friend crucified and then a week later he stands before you and asks you to put your finger into his womb, that you'd remember without distortion? Honestly, it would be easier to prove that men never walked on the moon or that the Holocaust never took place than to prove that the resurrection of Jesus Christ never took place. 6 years ago, I buried my sister with irrefutable, logical arguments to no avail. She was blinded by culture and religious distortions, and my words were not enough to lift the blinding. Indeed, a week later, she sent me a letter. It basically said, I can't refute your arguments. I don't want to. I never want to talk about Jesus with you again. So I knew nothing I said would make any difference, but maybe the friend I could be could. And so I became her friend. As I held Joy's hand 15 days before she passed, I asked her to tell me about her relationship to God. She spoke passionately, and I listened intently. After she finished, I gently asked if she would do her baby brother a big favor when she prayed to God and as she lay on her deathbed. She smiled at her brother in the robe and said, "You want me to pray for you?" And I smiled even bigger and said, "Yes, very much so. Would you please ask God what he thinks of Jesus? Forget the legalistic Jesus the church taught you. Forget what anyone has ever told you about Jesus never existing. Ask God the Father. He knows you can trust him." She welled up with tears, and she profusely thanked me, I believe, for respecting her as a brother to a sister and not treating her like a missionary to the natives. After this, I shared with her what happened to me when I asked God, who is the real Jesus? Finally, it was time for a man in the robe to leave. She was in great pain, and the doctors were coming to unhook her from her final, no longer working dialysis treatment. As I left, I thought about the question, who is Jesus, and how God would answer it. And it occurred to me that this was the very question Rabbi Saul of Tarsus asked Jesus on the road to Damascus. Who are you, Lord? Saul loved God, but hated Jesus. But it wasn't Jesus he hated, but a distortion. And I think the same was true of my sister. And so Jesus appeared to Saul, and that brought Saul to a question. Who are you, Lord? And that question was answered in Damascus, blind and helpless for 3 days, during which time God lifted Satan's blinding about Jesus so Saul could make an informed choice. After 3 days, the scales fell off, and he saw the real Jesus who loved him and died for him. And I wondered, how might God respond to my sister if she asked, "Who is Jesus?" And that became the question of this sermon. Fortunately, we don't need to guess, because Jesus himself answered that question in his own words. 7 times in the Gospel of John, Jesus succinctly revealed who he is by declaring, "I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the vine." I suppose we could all do that. I am the pastor of Community Church at Some Village. I'm a husband. I'm Chuck Rasmussen. But no one would stone me and then crucify me for saying these things. But they did Jesus. Why? The answer is revealed in a dialogue Jesus had with religious leaders where Jesus said, "Before Abraham was, I am." Most moderns have little idea of the mega significance of this "I am" declaration, but the religious leaders of that day did. They knew that when God appeared to Moses in the burning bush, Moses asked God his name, and God revealed, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites, I am sent me to you." And the Hebrew word translated, "I am," is Yahweh. And a devout Jew so reverenced that name that they believed this name must not be spoken by any human being, the name of which it is death to utter. And Yahweh does not refer to one of the dozen man-made Roman gods. That wouldn't have bothered anyone. It refers to the one and only God, the uncaused, uncreated creator and sustainer of the universe. So that when Jesus said, "Before Abraham was, I am," he's claiming to be the eternal. I am God who has no beginning or end. And the religious leaders who heard him say this understood this crystal clear. And that's why they picked up stones to stone him. Could have claimed he was a Roman god, no problem. But not the God of the Old Testament. The stoning attempts are repeated every time Jesus makes a claim to deity. After Jesus said, "I and my Father are one," the crowd declared, "We are not stoning you for any good work, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, claim to be God." Now, C.S. Lewis graphically contrasted the claims of Jesus with those of other religions when he said, if you had gone to Buddha and asked him, "Are you the son of Brahma?" he would have said, "My son, you are still in the veil of illusion." If you had gone to Socrates and asked, "Are you Zeus?" he would have laughed at you. And if you had gone to Mohammed and asked, "Are you Allah?" he would first have rent his clothes and then he would have cut off your head. In my opinion, said Lewis, the only person who can say the sort of things Jesus said is either God or a complete lunatic suffering from that form of delusion which undermines the whole mind of man. If you think, still quoting Lewis, that you are a poached egg when you are looking for a piece of toast to suit you, you may be sane. But if you think you are God, there's no chance for you. And that is why Jesus was crucified. At his trial, he claimed to be the Daniel 7:13 God-man of the Old Testament. And all 7 I am statements of Jesus affirm this truth. Number 1, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry. In the Jewish Old Testament, Yahweh is considered to be the bread of life. So this is a claim to deity. So after Jesus fed 5,000 in the wilderness, the crowd wanted to make him king. After he said, I am the bread of life, they stopped following him. Following a miracle worker is one thing. A madman who thinks he's God, quite another. 2, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. In the beginning, God said, let there be light, because God is, in fact, the source of all light. No God, no light. So when Jesus claims to be the light, it is another clear claim to deity. 3, I am the door to salvation, and no one can enter except by me, Jesus. So to speak, Jesus is 4 to the equation 2 plus 2, and all other answers are wrong. And that's not mathematical racism. It's truth about reality. And reality doesn't care if you deny it. But the one who created reality does. And this is why Peter, a Jew, nevertheless taught that salvation is found in no one else, for there's no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. 4, I am the good shepherd. In the Old Testament, God the Father is called the good shepherd, and King David said it best in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Jesus claimed to be the good shepherd who came that we might have life and have it abundantly. Green pastures. And the Jewish leaders of that day recognized crystal clear that this was a claim to deity, which is why, after that seemingly innocent statement about being a good shepherd, they picked up stones to kill him. And they tried to kill him not for making so-called racist claims to be superior, but a blasphemous claim to be God. 5, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Jesus doesn't say, take your pick, in me or in Buddha or Muhammad or Moses or in the universe or in your truth, whatever you want it to be. Take your pick. No, in Jesus and only Jesus. That is the reality from God. And reality doesn't care how our relativistic, truth-denying culture feels. But the one who created reality does. 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There is no confusion here. No one comes to the Father except through Jesus. Now, Saul of Tarsus denied this reality until he met the one who created reality. And this former enemy of Christianity said, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Now, if Jesus is a mere man, then Rabbi Botiak has understated his case. Jesus would not be a racist. He would be insane. C.S. Lewis is right. It would be easier to attribute sanity to a man who thinks he's a poached egg looking for a bread than to attribute sanity to the sayings and teachings of Jesus if he were a mere man. But Jesus is not a mere man. He is truly God and fully man, and the external evidence, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and the internal evidence, the resurrected Jesus in us and with us, is like 2 + 2 = 4. All other answers are false. Not because of racist numbers, but because truth corresponds to reality. And Jesus is truth. He created reality. 7. I am the vine. You are the branches. If a man remains in me, and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Now this applies to everything contingent, including the universe. One of the most brilliant scientists who ever lived, very courageous, Stephen Hawking, made one of the most non-scientific, idolatrous declarations since Aaron claimed it was the golden calf that brought Israel out of Egypt. Hawking said, because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. He not only said this, he published it. Gravity, according to Hawking, is the uncreated, uncaused creator of the universe out of nothing, which makes gravity his creator, his God, that he, in effect, worships. But gravity is not personal, and therefore gravity is as impotent to create as Aaron's golden calf. Gravity, like all scientific laws, only describes reality. It doesn't create reality any more than 2 + 2 somehow creates 4. But Jesus is personal, and therefore, unlike gravity, can create out of nothing. Without Jesus, we can do nothing. Without Jesus, there is nothing for gravity to gravitate. Indeed, without Jesus, there's nothing, period. Not even gravity. But with Jesus, and only Jesus, we can do all things for eternity. God's answer to the question, who is Jesus, is found in the 7 I am statements of Jesus. I am the bread of life, the light of the world, the door, the good shepherd, the resurrection and the life, the way, the truth, and the life, the vine. Jesus is the eternal I am God of the Old Testament. Now I know what you're thinking. There's no way anyone could communicate all this to someone on their deathbed, barely able to speak or hear or comprehend. And that's true. If you're thinking of finite human with the limitation of audible words. But God is not limited by vocal cords or even a physical brain. Even if the brain's riddled with Alzheimer's disease, the mind is not. And if you have a living loved one who has rejected Jesus and they are in the late stages of Alzheimer's, you may think it's too late. It is for you, but not for God. So keep praying. God can communicate directly to the soul, to the heart, the unadulterated love of Jesus. No audible words are needed. No working brain is necessary. Now, God brought Saul of Tarsus to a question. Who are you, Lord? And for 3 days, Saul lay blind and dead to the world, much as my sister did for her final 3 days. And in those 3 days, God lifted the blinding about Jesus. Did God override Saul's free will and maketh him believe? We have no biblical evidence that God ever does that, and much evidence that he doesn't. What God did do is lift the blinding lies of Satan so that Saul could make a God-empowered choice based upon the truth, and that took 3 days for Saul. And by the way, it took 7 years for Old Testament Nebuchadnezzar. But that's another sermon for another time. God will not override our free will and control us like a general controlling a drone, but neither will he leave us alone. He happens to know how to get our attention and reveal his love, and he has infinite means at his disposal. And although I can't prove it from Scripture or disprove it, I wonder if Jesus does something like this in principle to everyone before they die. In Philippians 2:9-11, Paul quotes Isaiah and he applies it to Jesus. Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. Now, universalists take this verse to mean everyone will be saved. I am not a universalist because I believe it is possible for someone to bow with their body and confess with their mouth, but not submit to Jesus as Lord in their heart, no matter what's done, no matter what they've seen. Just as some who believe in God, like the demons who know God better than we do, nevertheless do not voluntarily submit to God as God. And God will not maketh them, like a general maketh his drone do what he wants. But I take this verse to mean that God will give an opportunity for everyone to accept or reject the real Jesus who is Lord before they die. God wants all to be saved, even those we can't imagine God would want. It is not God who says, let them go to hell. It is we who do that, cursing in anger. God will lift the blinding of the legalistic, graceless, Islamic, Hindu, atheistic fairy tales by which so many have been deceived by our culture and false religions, many through no fault of their own. Now, normally, the way God does this is he sends missionaries to lift the blinding. And that's why God sent Saul missionaries. But Saul killed them, one after another. And after Saul killed Stephen, the choicest of all God's missionaries, well, God gave it up. What more can I do? Saul has crossed the line. Let him go to hell. Well, that's what we would think if Stephen was our son or husband. And Saul murdered him. But not God. God never says, let him go to hell. When normal measures fail, God is not out of options. Saul kills missionaries. Well, I'll send Saul a missionary he can't kill because he's already been killed and rose again. God never gives up. He is not willing that any perish. Amen. Saul asked, who are you, Lord? And God answered. And I believe God will do the same for Rabbi Botiak and did the same for the late Stephen Hawking and my sister or anyone who asks before they die. Before they die. Now, Martin Luther, the great reformer, thought some would be allowed to answer this question after they die. But I am not prepared to say that. My sister's earthly race was completed on October 29th, and I believe her eternal destiny was sealed. But if before that hour she asked, "Who are you, Lord?" as I requested her to do, and as Saul of Tarsus did do, then I believe God would answer by enveloping her soul in the love of Jesus and show her who Jesus really is. Her brain and body look dead to us, but not to God. However, she would still need to make a God-empowered choice. God won't maketh anyone, but he will empower anyone to make a real choice about Jesus. If she opened the door, the only door to salvation, then on October 29th at 12:30 p.m., in the words of 1 John chapter 3, verse 2, that would become a reality. We shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. At that moment, she would know Jesus 1,000,000 times better than the most devout saint on the earth. And so, my friends, my dearest friends, that is my answer to the question, how would God answer my sister's Joy's question? Did she ask and respond? She never told me she did. Or didn't. And she may not have been able to tell me. So, I have hope, but not certainty, which is good enough for me for now. On January 8, 1956, missionary Jim Elliot was speared to death by 22-year-old Dauma Saliento, the savage Jim was trying to reach with the love of Jesus. At that moment, as he was spearing him, Jim had no idea that Dauma would become a Christian 2 years later through his widow Elizabeth, and then travel the world proclaiming Jesus for 56 years until 2014 when he died. And that savage, so-called, had far greater impact for Jesus than Jim ever could have had he lived. And so too Stephen with Saul of Tarsus. And now they are all united for eternity. My friends, it is we who say, let him go to hell, but not God. God will even allow his most choicest servants, even his son, to be martyrs so that we can know the love of God. But of course, the question before us this morning is not whether someone did or didn't, but have we? If not, don't wait. Do it now. Ask the question, who is Jesus? And then be prepared, even if you have to go blind, for the answer. If you have a loved one who rejects Jesus, God's normal means is for you to go and be Jesus to them. And if you slough it off thinking, God will do it without me, then trust me, God will use extreme measures. But those extreme measures won't only be on our loved one. The extreme measures will be on you for your disobedience. But if your loved one does to your witness what Saul of Tarsus in principle did to Stephen, then please know you may be helpless, but God is not. God has a missionary that cannot be killed. Meanwhile, because he lives, we can face tomorrow.